Have you ever felt like you're living more for others than for yourself? Like every choice you make is somehow weighed against someone else's expectations. Your coworkers, your family, even a silent judgment of people scrolling through your social media? That quiet anxiety, that sense of emptiness that keeps you awake at night, often comes when you lose track of your own story. It's as if you've been wearing a mask for so long that it's fused to your skin, and now you're not sure where the mask ends and where you truly begin. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering is born in this exact place. When we trade our authenticity for approval, when we start mistaking the mask for our real face. The mask, what Jung called a persona, isn't evil by itself. In fact, it helps us survive, helps us adapt, helps us play roles in society. But the danger begins when you forget that it's only a role, not your essence. And maybe that's why you've been feeling so restless, so fragmented, so pulled in 1,000 different directions. Because deep down, a part of you knows this isn't the whole story of who you are. Picture a rope tied tightly around your chest. You can still breathe, but just enough to keep going. Day after day, the pressure builds, not because the world is actively crushing you, but because you keep tightening the rope yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile when you feel like crying, every time you silence your own voice to keep the peace. At first, it looks like harmony, but inside the cost is mounting. And maybe you've noticed it in the small moments. At work, when you stay late to meet someone else's deadline, even though your own energy is gone. At home, when you agree to plans you don't want, just avoid disappointing others. Or in your own heart, when you realize you don't even remember the last time you made a choice simply because it felt true to you. That kind of forgetting comes at a price. And the price is always your inner peace. This is why Jung spoke so much about masks and the danger of living entirely through them. Because the longer you stay hidden behind persona, the more distant your true self becomes. And yet, here's the hope. No mask, no matter how old or tight, is permanent. There's always a way to remove it. There's always a way back to yourself. Think about silence for a moment. Not the uncomfortable silence where you feel pressure to fill the air with words, but the deep, sacred kind, the silence where you suddenly hear your own thoughts again, where the constant hum of approval seeking quiets down, and you realize there's another voice waiting, yours. That silence is the first crack in the mask. It's the first reminder that you are still here, still whole, even if you've forgotten. And this is why what Jung discovered isn't just abstract psychology. It's a map for liberation. If you've been feeling that your life is ruled by other people's expectations, if the emptiness is growing heavier by the day, know this. There's a way through. And the path begins not by fighting the mask, but by finally seeing it for what it is. Because the moment you see it clearly, you no longer confuse it with yourself. And when that happens, a new kind of freedom becomes possible. A freedom that doesn't depend on applause or likes or external validation. A freedom that allows you to breathe deeply, maybe for the first time in years. And it's exactly here that Jung offered one of his most profound ideas. Jung gave a name to that mask we wear to be accepted. He called it persona. Think of it like a role in a play. Every day, you step on the stage of your life, at work, at home, even with your closest friends. And you perform. You smile when you're tired. You nod when you disagree. You say yes when every part of you is whispering no. On the outside, it looks like harmony. On the inside, though, something begins to break. The persona is useful. It helps you navigate the world, helps you fit in. But when the role takes over the actor, when the mask fuses to your face, that's when the suffering begins. Jung believed that while the persona is necessary, it is only half of the story. Beneath it lies something far more raw and honest. The shadow. The shadow is a collection of everything you hide, deny, or push away. Your anger, your jealousy, your secret desires, your fears. These live in the shadow. And when the persona grows too strong, it squeezes the shadow into deeper darkness. That's why so many people feel torn in two. A polished, smiling exterior and a restless, frustrated interior. Think of someone who always says yes. On the surface, they appear endlessly kind, helpful, dependable. People praise them for being easygoing. But inside, a storm is brewing. Resentment builds with every unspoken boundary. every moment they silence their own needs. It's like trying to hold your breath underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually you come gasping back to the surface. The persona may earn approval, but it cannot give peace. And maybe you know that feeling too well. You go along with plans you don't want because it feels safer than saying no. You hide your sadness behind a practiced smile because you don't want to make others uncomfortable. You pretend to be fine at work, even when the stress is eating you alive. Each of these moments may seem small, but together, they form a life that looks nothing like your own. The danger is subtle, because from the outside, everything looks fine. You're admired, respected, maybe even envied. But inside, the distance between who you really are and who you pretend to be keeps growing wider. And here's the haunting truth. The wider that gap becomes, the more anxious, resentful, and disconnected you feel. The persona can earn applause, but it cannot fill the emptiness. Jung warned that when the persona dominates, the shadow doesn't disappear. It only goes underground. And what goes underground doesn't stay quiet forever. It leaks out in ways you might not even notice. Irritability, passive-aggressive comments, sudden bursts of anger, or the quiet erosion of your joy. It shows up in your relationships, in your health, in the way you see yourself when you're finally alone. So the real question isn't whether you have a persona. You do. Everyone does. The real question is, does the mask serve you, or are you serving the mask? Are you living as your whole self, or as a carefully constructed version designed to keep everyone else comfortable? Because here's the thing, a mask can never breathe. And if you live behind one for too long, neither can you. But what happens when persona grows too strong? In everyday life, this struggle doesn't usually announce itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly in the smallest of choices. You don't say no to your boss when he asks you to take on one more task, even though you're already exhausted. You accept an invitation you don't want, smiling politely while your heart sinks. You stay silent when you long to speak up, swallowing words that could have set you free. On the surface, these seem like minor sacrifices, but together, they carve away pieces of your identity until you begin to wonder if you even recognize yourself anymore. Jung had a way of putting this into sharp focus. What you resist persists. Every time you resist your own truth, your desire for rest, your need for boundaries, your longing to be honest, you don't erase it. You bury it, and what's buried doesn't vanish. It lingers in the shadows, waiting, gathering strength. The more you push it down, the heavier it becomes, like a weight strapped invisibly to your chest. And eventually, that weight starts to shape your life in ways you can't control. Think about it. When was the last time you agreed to something you didn't want, only to feel resentment rising in your chest as soon as you walked away? You might have smiled in the moment, convinced yourself it wasn't a big deal, but later, that resentment simmered. Maybe you snapped at someone you love, or lay awake with a restless mind replaying the moment, wishing you had spoken your truth. These little betrayals against yourself may feel harmless, but each one tightens the mask a little more. It's like carrying a backpack you never take off. At first, it feels light enough to manage. But as the days turn into months, and the months into years, the weight compounds. Eventually, you forget what it feels like to walk freely without it. This is what happens when persona takes control. You learn to survive with a burden, mistaking endurance for peace. But peace doesn't come from endurance. It comes from alignment, when what you feel inside matches what you express outside. And here's the painful truth. Every time you silence your authentic self to please others, you drift further away from that alignment. You may gain approval, but you lose the quiet dignity of being whole. And maybe this is why you feel so tired, even when you're not physically exhausted. Maybe this is why you feel disconnected, even in a room full of people who admire you. Because deep down, your soul knows the truth. You are not created to live as performance. The irony is sharp. In trying to keep the peace with others, you declare war on yourself. In trying to be everything for everyone else, you become nothing for yourself. And the emptiness grows, not because you're broken, but because you've abandoned the very voice that could make you whole again. And here's where Jung's insight becomes unsettling. The persona doesn't just cost you authenticity, It demands interest. The more you feed it, the more it consumes. Until one day you wake up, look in the mirror, and wonder, who am I really? That moment is terrifying, but it's also sacred, because it means your true self is still knocking, still asking to be remembered. And the hidden danger of living this way is much greater than you imagine. If you never break free from this cycle, the consequences eventually arrive. They don't always crash in suddenly. They creep in quietly, almost invisibly at first, until one day you realize the weight has become unbearable. Emotional exhaustion is the first sign. You feel drained, not just at the end of a long workday, but all the time. Even small tasks demand enormous energy. The simple joy of being alive fades, replaced by a dull heaviness that clings to you no matter what you do. You laugh, but it feels forced. You rest, but never feel restored. Then comes isolation. When your whole life is shaped by a persona, your relationships remain at the surface. People love the version of you that pleases them, not the real you. And deep down, you know it. Every smile, every compliment feels hollow, because it isn't directed at your authentic self. It's aimed at the mask you've been wearing. Slowly, you begin to feel alone, even in crowded rooms. The irony is brutal. Surrounded by people, yet starving for connection. Over time, your closest relationships suffer too. When you hide your truth long enough, resentment builds like poison in your bloodstream. You give and give, hoping for appreciation, but inside you grow bitter, silently screaming, "Doesn't anyone see me? Doesn't anyone care?" Yet how can they see you if you've hidden yourself behind a mask for so long? This is how partnerships fracture, how friendships weaken, how families drift apart. Not always because of cruelty, but because authenticity has been buried. And here lies the most dangerous consequence of all, the slow erosion of identity. Imagine standing before a mirror and not recognizing the eyes that look back at you. The features are yours, but the spark is gone. The reflection feels like a stranger. That's the cost of living too long as a persona. You begin to lose touch with your soul. And once that happens, you move through life like a ghost, present in body, absent in spirit. You go through the motions, work, conversations, daily obligations, but something essential has slipped away. This is the cruelest prison of all. Living a life that doesn't belong to you, a life designed by expectations, held together by fear, drained by endless performance. You may have achievements, recognition, even comfort, but none of it satisfies, because it's not rooted in your essence. And no matter how much you try to silence it, a quiet voice inside keeps asking, is this really all I am? The tragedy is that this voice doesn't vanish with time. It only grows louder. And if you ignore it for too long, it turns into despair. That's when people spiral into burnout, anxiety, or depression, not because they are weak, but because the soul cannot live forever behind a mask. Jung warned us of this long ago. The psyche demands wholeness and will rebel against fragmentation until it is heard. And yet, even in the darkest part of the struggle, there is a seed of hope. Because the very discomfort you feel, the exhaustion, the disconnection, the loneliness, is not proof that you are lost. It is proof that your soul is still alive, still longing for freedom, still calling you back to yourself. The mask may be heavy, but it is not permanent. The prison may feel suffocating, but the key has always been in your hands. And this is where Jung's insight shines like a hidden light in the darkness. Because he discovered that there's a path out of the cycle, a way to peel away the mask, confront the shadow, and step into the freedom of living as your whole self. It is not easy, but it is possible. And once you taste it, you will never want to go back. But Jung discovered that there is indeed a path to liberation. Jung believed there is a way out of the mask, a path not of perfection, but a wholeness. He called it individuation, the process of becoming your true self, undivided, authentic, alive. It doesn't mean rejecting your roles or responsibilities. It means no longer being swallowed by them. It means finding the balance between what the world expects and what your soul needs. And the steps, while simple, are powerful enough to change everything about the way you live. The first step is recognition. You can't transform what you refuse to see. Start noticing the moments when you act only to please others. Maybe it's the yes you offer out of guilt. Maybe it's the smile you force when you're exhausted. Maybe it's the silence you hold when your truth is burning inside you. These are signals, not of failure, but of awareness. Recognition is like switching on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see what has always been there. The second step is integration. This is where many people hesitate, because it requires turning toward the shadow. Your anger, your desires, your jealousy, your grief, these are not enemies to destroy. They are parts of you waiting to be acknowledged. Jung taught that if you keep rejecting them, they will control you from the shadows. But when you bring them into the light, when you admit, yes, I feel this, you strip them of their power to sabotage you. Integration isn't about acting out every impulse. It's about owning your truth so it no longer owns you. The third step is conscious action. Awareness without practice fades quickly. Transformation requires choices, small, daily, intentional choices that honor your real self. This might look like saying no when everything in you wants to retreat into automatic compliance. It might mean pausing before you react, breathing deeply instead of exploding in anger. It could mean writing down your emotions so they stop spinning endlessly in your mind. Or practicing silence, not the kind filled with fear, but the sacred quiet where your soul speaks. Each small action is like planting a seed, and over time, those seeds grow into a life rooted in authenticity. The final step is legacy. Individuation is not a selfish project. It ripples outward. As you become more whole, your relationships change. They become more honest, more grounded, more resilient. You stop attracting connections that thrive on masks, and you start building bonds based on truth. Your presence itself becomes an offering to others, proof that it is possible to live without pretending. This is the gift of individuation, not just freedom for yourself, but inspiration for those around you. And here is the beautiful paradox. Individuation is never finished. It's not a box you check off or a destination you arrive at once and for all. It is a lifelong journey, a daily practice of choosing wholeness over fragmentation, truth over performance, light over shadow. Some days you will stumble. Some days you will put the mask back on. But every day you have another chance to take even one step closer to your authentic self. And each step is a victory. So what does this look like in your life right now? It looks like paying attention to when you betray yourself. It looks like welcoming your shadow instead of fearing it. It looks like choosing a single small action, saying no, writing your feelings, practicing silence that affirms your truth. And over time, those small acts accumulate, building a life that feels less like a performance and more like home. This is the map Jung left us. Recognition, integration, conscious action, legacy, a path not toward perfection, but toward wholeness, a path that promises freedom, not from difficulty, but from the emptiness of living as someone you are not. But before you rush to embrace your shadow and walk this path, there is something you must be careful about. Because even on the road to individuation, there are traps that can pull you back into old cycles. And these traps are far more subtle than you might think. But before you integrate your shadow, you must be careful of the traps. On the journey toward individuation, there are hidden traps, pitfalls that can disguise themselves as progress, but quietly pull you back into the old cycle. Jung warned that the path to authenticity is not straight and easy. It is more like walking a tightrope, where balance is everything. And if you don't notice the dangers, you risk mistaking illusion for freedom. The first trap is ego inflation. When people begin to discover their authentic self, they sometimes confuse authenticity with arrogance. They think, this is who I am, so I can say whatever I want, however I want. But that's not wholeness. That's ego in disguise. True authenticity does not demand attention or crush others. It is grounded, humble, and rooted in respect. If the mask was about pleasing everyone, ego inflation becomes about dominating everyone. Both are extremes, and neither leads to peace. The second trap is isolation. Once you realize how much of life has been performance, it's tempting to retreat from the world altogether. You may feel like cutting off relationships, hiding from social settings, rejecting anything that reminds you of the persona. But individuation is not about rejecting the world. It's about re-entering it as your whole self. To isolate is to run from the challenge of authentic connection, and that only deepens a loneliness you were trying to escape. The third trap is the savior complex. Sometimes, once people taste freedom, they want to fix everyone else. They see masks everywhere and feel compelled to rip them off others. But this becomes another form of control, another way of avoiding their own work. You cannot carry someone else's shadow for them. You cannot force individuation on another soul. The greatest gift you can give is to live your own wholeness, so fully that it inspires others to seek their own. The fourth trap is regression. This one may be the most seductive. When the process gets hard, when facing the shadow feels overwhelming, there's a strong pull to retreat back into the comfort of old masks. After all, the persona once kept you safe, even if it was suffocating. The temptation to slip back into automatic yes, polite smiles, and rehearsed performances can be strong. Regression whispers, "Go back. It's easier there." But easier is not the same as free. These obstacles are like gusts of wind shaking the rope beneath your feet. The goal is not to eliminate the wind. It will always be there. The goal is to keep your balance, to notice the sway and correct it gently without panic. Individuation is not about walking perfectly. It's about not giving up when you wobble. Every step, even the shaky ones, teaches you more about who you really are. So how do you protect yourself against these traps? By remembering the essence of the journey. Wholeness is not arrogance, so keep your heart soft. Wholeness is not isolation, so keep reaching out for connection. Wholeness is not saving others, so keep your focus on your own growth. And wholeness is not regression, so keep choosing courage over comfort. Each time you resist these traps, you strengthen your ability to walk forward with clarity. You create space for something extraordinary to emerge. The moment when a mask no longer rules you, the shadow no longer frightens you, and your fragmented pieces finally begin to reunite. That's when individuation becomes more than a theory. It becomes a lived reality. And once you step past these traps, you prepare the ground for the most powerful moment of all, the quiet miracle of rebirth. And when you overcome these traps, something extraordinary happens. This is the moment of rebirth, the quiet miracle that changes everything. After all the years of bending yourself to please others, after the countless masks you've worn just to be accepted, you finally realize a radical truth. You do not need external approval to exist. You never did. The applause, the likes, the nods of validation were never the source of your worth. They were only echoes bouncing off the walls of your mask. Now, for the first time, you begin to hear a deeper sound, the steady, unmistakable rhythm of your own soul. Imagine standing before a shattered mirror. For so long, those cracks only reminded you of failure, pain, and rejection. Each fracture seemed to confirm that you were broken beyond repair. But now, something extraordinary happens. Instead of discarding the broken pieces, you begin to rearrange them. And what once looked like destruction transforms into a stained glass window. The cracks remain, but instead of hiding the light, they allow it to pass through. The very fractures you once despised now illuminate the beauty of your story. This is what transformation feels like. You haven't erased your wounds. You've given them meaning. You haven't silenced your shadow. You've integrated it. You haven't escaped your past. You've woven it into something stronger. This is authenticity, not perfection, but wholeness. Not the absence of pain, but the courage to let pain become a path. And it is here in the silence within that freedom is born. Not the loud, dramatic kind of freedom that demands to be noticed, but the gentle, unshakable kind that no one can take away. The kind that allows you to breathe fully, to walk into a room without fear, to speak with honesty, to love without disguise. This is a freedom that comes when the mask falls away and you finally stand as yourself, unapologetic, unhidden. Enough. Think of it like a seed breaking through the soil. For months, it lived in darkness, unseen, covered by weight. But in silence, it gathered strength. And one day, without fanfare, it pushed through into the light. That is what your soul is doing right now. The years of struggle were not wasted. They were preparation. Every yes that suffocated you, every silence that cost you, every tear shed behind a mask, they were watering the ground. And now, something new is growing. You may still wobble. You may still reach for the mask at times. But the difference is that now you know the truth. You know you are more than the persona. You know you are more than the shadow. You are the whole unbroken self that can embrace both and still shine. And that is a kind of power no approval can ever give and no rejection can ever take away. So let this be your reminder. Your freedom is not waiting out there in someone else's hands. It has always been inside you, waiting for the moment you dare to stop pretending. The stained glass window is already forming. The light is already shining through. All that remains is for you to step fully into it. The true freedom begins when you live without masks. If this message spoke to you, write in the comments, "I choose my peace." And if you want to go even deeper, watch the next video I prepared about how to integrate your shadow without fear.